The story began with a whisper across the stars. A human colony far from Earth sent a single distress call into the void. The message was broken, filled with static and fear. The voice was frantic, almost screaming. "This is Eidolon Prime, under attack. Ships unknown, cities are burning." Then silence. The transmission ended mid-sentence, cut off so suddenly that those listening could almost feel the terror behind it. The channel stayed open for hours, only carrying the sound of empty static, no answers, no follow-ups, no survivors speaking again. At first, people thought it was a malfunction. Colonies sometimes lost power or signals when storms raged in their skies. But soon, rumors spread. Military outposts checked and rechecked the call. The coordinates were real. The message was genuine. Eidolon Prime, one of humanity's proudest colonies, had gone silent. 3 days later, a small patrol ship named Horizon's Edge was sent to investigate. The crew was young, not expecting much. Most thought they would find a damaged communications array, maybe pirates, maybe nothing at all. But as they approached the system, dread began to grow. From orbit, Eidolon Prime should have been shining with life. Its cities glowing bright across the surface, its spaceports sending traffic up and down, its oceans reflecting starlight like a jewel. Instead, the planet looked dark. The patrol ship descended slowly, scanners sweeping across the surface. The captain, an older woman named Commander Lyra Voss, leaned forward in her chair, her face pale. "Run it again," she ordered. The sensors confirmed the impossible. Cities gone. Forests burned, oceans blackened with ash. The colony that had once held millions of humans was nothing more than ruins. No radio signals, no lights, no survivors. The crew sat in silence, staring at their screens. The youngest officer whispered, "It looks dead." When the Horizon's Edge entered orbit, the devastation became clear. Entire city grids were reduced to grey skeletons of buildings. Towers that had once reached the sky were now blackened husks, their steel bones jutting upward like broken teeth. The patrol ship sent drones down to the surface. They flew over highways filled with burned-out vehicles, streets littered with debris and fields where homes once stood, but there were no bodies. Millions of colonists had lived here. Families, children, workers, scientists. Yet the planet was empty. No human remains, no survivors hiding in bunkers, no signs of resistance, only silence and something else. Near the ruins of the capital city, the drones picked up twisted wreckage of strange weapons, alien designs no human had ever seen before. Long black blades of metal fused with glowing cores, devices still humming faintly with unnatural energy. Commander Voss narrowed her eyes as she looked at the footage. This wasn't nature. This wasn't pirates. This was deliberate. Then came the most chilling discovery of all. Carved deep into the burned surface of the capital's central plaza was a single message. The letters were huge, written in a language that the Horizon's Edge's translation AI barely managed to process. It read, "This is only the beginning." The crew fell silent. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a raid. Someone had destroyed Eidolon Prime with precision, erased millions of human lives, and then left a warning carved into the ground. The young officer trembled as he read it aloud. "They wanted us to see this." Commander Voss stood, her voice hard. "Send everything to the Terran Council, immediately." When the Horizon's Edge returned to Earth with their report, the Terran Council gathered in emergency session. The Great Chamber was filled with admirals, diplomats, and representatives from every colony still standing. The images were displayed on massive screens, the burned cities, the empty fields, the strange alien weapons, and finally, the message. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Some stared in disbelief, others clenched their fists in rage. For centuries, humanity's colonies had grown safely among the stars. They had fought wars with pirates, yes, and clashed with rival factions. But nothing on this scale, nothing that could erase an entire world in a single strike. This was no accident, one counselor said. No, another replied. This was war. The admiral spoke grimly. They knew what this meant, an enemy powerful enough to destroy. A colony without warning would not stop at one. This was a test, a demonstration, a promise of worse things to come. News spread like wildfire. Across human space, families crowded around screens, watching the grim footage of Eidolon Prime's remains. The image of the message carved into the earth haunted every home. This is only the beginning. Panic grew. Colonies closer to the outer rim began to fear they would be next. Civilian ships fled inward towards safer worlds. Some leaders called for calm, saying it might have been an isolated attack. Others whispered that the aliens responsible were preparing for a full invasion. But one truth spread in every corner of human space. Humanity was not safe anymore. The Terran Council's intelligence network began searching for answers. Who had done this? Which species in the galaxy was capable of such destruction? Some suspected the Dravari Dominion, an empire known for conquest and cruelty. Others believed it was the mysterious Krith Collective, a machine race that had vanished centuries ago. But there was no proof. The only evidence left behind were the strange weapons and the chilling words. And yet, the way Eidolon Prime had been destroyed felt intentional, almost personal, as if someone wanted to provoke humanity. Commander Lyra Voss, summoned before the council, spoke firmly. I saw it with my own eyes, she said. They didn't just destroy Eidolon Prime. They erased it. They made sure not a single voice survived. They wanted to send a message, to make us afraid. The chamber was silent as she leaned forward. We cannot ignore this. If we do, more colonies will burn, more families will vanish. This was only the beginning, just as they said. We must be ready for what comes next. Her words echoed across the hall, carried into the hearts of every leader present. By the end of the emergency session, the Terran Council had no doubts left. Humanity was under attack. Someone, somewhere in the galaxy, had declared war, but the Council also knew something else. Humanity had survived worse before. On Earth, they had endured endless wars, disasters, and hardships. And every time, they had risen stronger. If someone thought they could erase humanity with a single strike, they would soon learn the truth. Because humanity would not go quietly, and humanity would not forgive. The chamber darkened as the final images of Eidolon Prime flickered across the screens, the burned planet, the ruins, the carved message. This is only the beginning, and so it was. The galaxy carried whispers, and every whisper carried fear. News of Eidolon Prime's fall spread faster than light, faster than any official announcement could contain. Traders whispered in markets, soldiers whispered in barracks, and children whispered in the dark, asking questions their parents could not answer. What had happened? Who had done this? Why was there nothing left? The official reports were brief and cold. A human colony had been destroyed. No survivors. Unknown attackers. Investigation ongoing. But people always wanted more than the official truth. Rumors began to fill the silence. Refugees from nearby systems spoke of shadows in the sky, ships shaped like blades that cut through the stars with streams of burning plasma. Some swore they had seen weapons tear entire districts apart with a single strike. Others claimed the colonists hadn't been killed but taken, stolen away into the void. In the streets of human cities, people told each other darker stories. They said an ancient empire had returned. They said monsters from forgotten wars had awakened. They said this was not the first colony to vanish, only the first to be noticed. The fear spread like wildfire, and no one could put it out. At the same time, the Terran Council struggled to control the situation. Official broadcasts spoke of safety, of investigation, of strength, but behind closed doors every leader knew the truth. Eidolon Prime was not an accident. It was not a random act of piracy. It was the opening move of something far more dangerous. The Council's intelligence networks worked tirelessly, scanning intercepted transmissions, watching distant borders, listening to faint signals drifting from deep space. One name began to surface more than others. The rumors pointed to an empire most humans had only heard about in whispers, the Zeltharian Dominion, an old power, ancient and proud, known for their silence and their cruelty. They had not expanded in centuries, content to remain in their hidden territories, a shadow that most of the galaxy avoided. But now, some said they had awakened. The evidence was thin, almost invisible, a fragment of a weapon signature, a corrupted data file from a freighter that had been attacked and barely escaped, a half-mad survivor who swore the attackers had, eyes that burned like fire through their ship's viewports. None of it was proof, but it was enough for suspicion, and suspicion was enough to build fear. The Galactic Council, a coalition of many species, refused to involve themselves. Their representatives declared the event a localized tragedy, urging calm and diplomacy. They said humanity should not jump to conclusions, that perhaps this was only an isolated conflict. To the Terran Council, those words felt like betrayal. Humanity had once trusted the great powers of the galaxy to protect peace. Now, when one of their colonies had been reduced to ash, those same powers turned their eyes away. The message was clear. Humanity would stand alone. In the colonies, the whispers turned to anger. Families who had lost loved ones called for revenge. Soldiers demanded action. Entire cities held vigils for Eidolon Prime, their lights flickering in the night as people stood in silence, remembering those who were gone. But beneath the mourning, there was a current of rage, growing stronger with every passing day. On the planet Series 9, a group of refugees gathered in a crowded hall, retelling the story of their escape. They had been away from Eidolon Prime, on a mining outpost near the system's edge, when the attack began. From the distance of their telescopes, they saw the skies above the colony fill with fire. They saw structures fall in moments, oceans boil, and lights vanish. They fled before the attackers could reach them. Their voices shook as they spoke, but their words carried through the hall like knives. They weren't raiders, one miner said. They didn't take valuables, they didn't leave survivors. They came to destroy, that's all they wanted. Another man leaned forward, his eyes haunted, and they carved words into the ground, words they knew we'd find. That wasn't just destruction, that was a warning or a promise. The hall fell silent. No one knew what to say. Back on Earth, the Terran Admiralty met in secret chambers, away from the public eye. Holographic maps of human space floated before them, red marks highlighting every colony close to the borders. They spoke in low, grim voices. They knew humanity had grown strong in recent centuries, its fleets modernized and its armies trained. But they also knew they had not faced a true war since the Expansion Age. Against an enemy capable of erasing a world, would it be enough? One admiral, a man with steel-grey hair and scars across his face, spoke the words no one else wanted to. This was only the beginning, we all know it. Whoever they are, they won't stop. Not after one colony, not after two. They'll keep coming until we answer. But the question hung heavy in the room. How would humanity answer? Shipyards began working day and night. Factories were ordered to triple production. Old ships, once retired, were recalled into service. Recruitment surged across every colony as young men and women volunteered in record numbers, their eyes burning. With the same fury carried in the whispers of the people, Humanity was preparing, even if the enemy's face was still hidden in the dark. Yet while the preparations grew, so too did the unease. Strange signals began to appear on the edges of human space. Merchant convoys vanished without trace. Patrol ships reported seeing shadows just beyond their sensors, movements that disappeared the moment they tried to lock on. Entire mining stations stopped responding to calls. When rescue ships arrived, they found them empty, completely abandoned, as though every person aboard had simply vanished. The whispers grew darker still. Some said the attackers weren't just killing, they were taking, collecting, studying, preparing. Others said the enemy wasn't alien at all, but something born from humanity's own past, a remnant of forgotten wars come to reclaim the stars. The truth was uncertain, but fear does not need truth to grow. In the council chambers, the leaders argued. Some wanted to strike first, to send fleets into the dark and find whoever was responsible. Others urged caution, afraid that a reckless move would invite total war. But one truth remained, cold and undeniable. Humanity was already at war. The enemy had declared it with fire and silence, with ash and words carved into stone. Commander Lyra Voss, the woman who had seen the ruins of Eidolon Prime with her own eyes, was summoned once again to speak. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried the weight of what she had witnessed. "They want us to be afraid," she said, "and we are. But fear can become something else. Fear can become fury. We cannot let this stand. If we wait, they will strike again. If we hesitate, we will lose another world. The time to act is now." Her words were met with silence, but they settled deep into the hearts of those listening. Outside the chambers, across every colony, people repeated a single phrase, spoken in whispers, carried from one corner of human space to another. "This is only the beginning." But with every whisper came another answer, one that burned hotter than fear itself. "If it is the beginning, then we will finish it." And so humanity began to prepare for a storm it could not yet see. The enemy's name was still only a rumor, their faces hidden, their fleets unseen. But the silence of Eidolon Prime still hung heavy across the stars, and the memory of its destruction burned like fire in every human heart. Somewhere out there, in the endless dark, the enemy was waiting, watching, planning, and humanity, for the first time in centuries, was sharpening its claws. The silence after Eidolon Prime's fall did not last long. It never could. Across human space, the story spread faster than light. At first, it was only rumors, half-broken messages, whispers from refugees, shaky recordings that made the rounds in black markets and soldier barracks. But soon, the truth became impossible to ignore. A human colony had been erased, its people vanished, its cities turned to ash, and the message carved into the planet's surface was burned into every mind. "This is only the beginning." The words echoed through every colony, every ship, every home. Humanity had always believed its colonies safe. They were protected by fleets, shielded by treaties, strengthened by centuries of progress. But now the illusion had shattered. If Eidolon Prime could fall, then nowhere was safe. Not Mars, not the core worlds, not even Earth. In the streets of New Alexandria, one of the largest colonies near the Inner Rim, families gathered to watch the Council's broadcast. The Terran High Chancellor appeared on every screen, his voice calm but grave. He spoke of loss, of tragedy, of mourning. He urged unity. He promised investigation. But behind his words, every listener could hear the truth he tried to soften. Humanity was at war, whether it wanted to be or not. And something began to shift. On that same day, long lines formed outside recruitment centers. Young men and women stood for hours in the cold, waiting for their chance to enlist. Some carried photos of family members lost on Eidolon Prime. Others came with nothing but burning anger in their hearts. Many were barely of age, but they lied about their years just to be accepted. The officers processing them had never seen numbers like this before. The halls filled, then overflowed, until tents had to be set up in the streets just to hold the crowds. Factories that once built commercial ships and farming machines were seized by the Admiralty. The orders were simple. No more delay, no more hesitation. Every world with shipyards would build warships. Every world with factories would supply them. Merchant fleets were drafted into service. Old battleships, retired for decades, were recalled. Their hulls refitted, their engines reignited. The stars themselves seemed to hum with new purpose. Not everyone believed at first. Some leaders of outer colonies called it madness. They argued for diplomacy, for waiting, for talking, but their voices were drowned out by the tide. Humanity had seen what waiting meant. Waiting meant silence. Waiting meant fire. Waiting meant another Eidolon Prime. And no colony wanted to be next. In the council chambers, debates raged for days. Admirals demanded resources, politicians demanded answers. But in the end, one truth united them. Humanity could no longer pretend. The unknown enemy had started this war, but it would be humanity that ended it. In a small mining town on Titan, a father buried his daughter, who had died of sickness while fleeing the Outer Rim. He turned to his two surviving sons and said only one thing: join them, make them pay. Both enlisted the next day. In the great shipyards of Proxima, entire families volunteered to work double shifts. Children carried water to their parents, who welded steel plates into the skeletons of massive dreadnoughts. The air shook with the sound of construction, and sparks lit the night sky brighter than the stars themselves. In the academies, veterans returned to teach. Young cadets sat silently, listening to stories of old wars, of tactics that turned defeat into victory, of humanity's resilience in the darkest hours of history. Their eyes burned with determination. This was not just another fight. This was survival. Meanwhile, in the void between the stars, the enemy continued to stir. Strange signals appeared and vanished. Merchant ships went missing. Patrol fleets returned scarred, their hulls scorched by weapons no one had seen before. But this time, humanity did not cower. They documented, they studied, and they prepared. Commander Lyra Voss, whose patrol ship had first seen the ruins of Eidolon Prime, became a symbol. Her testimony before the council spread across every colony. She spoke of the silence, of the destruction, of the message carved into stone. Her words carried weight because she had been there. And when she declared, "We must be ready," millions believed her. Across the galaxy, the whispers of fear began to change. They were no longer whispers of helplessness. They became whispers of vengeance. They destroyed one colony, people said in bars, in barracks, in marketplaces. Let them try again. Let them see what happens when humanity fights back. The Terran Admiralty issued its order. It was short, simple, and unyielding. Mobilize everything. And so it began. A tide unlike any the galaxy had ever seen. Hundreds of thousands of ships rolled out of dry docks, their hulls gleaming with fresh steel, their engines roaring with the power of a civilization united. Carriers the size of cities, destroyers sharp as blades, swarms of smaller frigates built to strike like wolves. Ship after ship launched into the void, their crews swearing oaths they intended to keep with blood and fire. The number grew larger every day. 10,000 ships, 50,000, 100,000, and still more came. Human space had never seen such a mobilization, not even during the expansion wars of old. This was something new, something greater, something born not of ambition but of fury. Recruitment slogans changed. No longer did they speak of duty or honor or exploration. The posters plastered across colonies bore a single line in black and red letters for Eidolon Prime. In the quiet hours, some feared what this meant. They wondered if humanity, in its anger, would lose itself. They wondered if vengeance would consume them all. But those thoughts were drowned out by the roar of the crowd, by the hammering of forges, by the endless tide of ships rising into the stars. One colony had fallen. Millions were dead or missing. Humanity grieved, yes, but grief had turned into something stronger. Grief had become resolve. Resolve had become steel. Steel had become fleets. On the eve of humanity's greatest mobilization, as the first 100,000 ships formed ranks across the void, Commander Lyra Voss stood on the bridge of her new flagship, watching the armada gather. She whispered to herself, her voice low but unyielding. They wanted a war. The stars outside glowed with the light of countless engines, like a second galaxy born from human hands. Now, she said, her eyes burning, they will have one. The galaxy had heard the enemy's promise. This is only the beginning, but humanity had answered. The beginning belongs to you. The ending belongs to us. And as the fleet grew larger and larger, the enemy still hidden in the dark, the galaxy began to tremble. For never before in history had 700,000 human warships been forged for one purpose, vengeance, and the call to arms had only just begun. The silence of preparation could not last forever. The enemy had struck once, and humanity knew they would strike again. What no one knew was when or where. Fleets patrolled the borders, colonies braced themselves, and recruitment never stopped. Still, fear lingered in the dark. The void between stars is endless, and in that endlessness shadows move unseen. It began with a whisper of movement near the edge of human space. A convoy of civilian transports was making its way from the outer colonies, carrying evacuees fleeing. The frontier, families packed into freighters, their possessions stuffed into crates, their eyes heavy with fear. Escorting them was a small formation of defense ships, 5 frigates and 1 destroyer, the Resolute. Their task was simple: guard the civilians until they reached the safer inner systems. For 3 days, the journey was calm. The stars drifted quietly, and the convoy's path seemed clear. Parents reassured their children, promising safety, promising that Earth itself was watching over them. But promises are fragile things in a galaxy at war. On the 4th day, the shadows appeared. The sensors on the Resolute screamed with alarms. Unidentified ships had slipped out of the dark, closing fast. Dozens of them, maybe more. Their signatures did not match any known design. Their hulls were sharp and angled, their drives burning with strange blue fire. It was them, the enemy that had destroyed Eidolon Prime. The convoy panicked. Civilian captains shouted across the comms, begging for orders, pleading for help. Children cried in the background, their voices cutting through the static. The frigates moved quickly, forming a shield between the transports and the enemy. But even the frigate captains knew the truth. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and alone. On the bridge of the Resolute, Captain Darian Kyle stood tall. He had fought pirates before, fought raiders and smugglers. But this was different. The air felt heavier, as though the weight of history itself pressed down on him. He could see the enemy fleet forming a wide net, cutting off every path of escape. He knew what this meant. If the Resolute and her escorts failed, the civilians would never make it home. "Signal the convoy," Kyle ordered, his voice steady. "Tell them to keep running. Tell them we will hold the line." The officers glanced at him in shock. They all knew what he was saying. The destroyer and the frigates would not survive this battle. But still, the order was carried out. On the civilian channels, voices broke into tears, parents whispering blessings, captains whispering thanks. The convoy turned its engines to full burn, racing toward safety, and the Resolute turned to face the storm. The enemy fleet closed in like wolves. Their ships moved with perfect precision, no hesitation, no mercy. They opened fire without a word, without a warning, their plasma weapons carving through the black. The human frigates answered in kind, their railguns flashing, their missiles screaming into the void. The first clash was brutal. A frigate exploded almost instantly, its hull torn apart in a burst of white fire. Another was crippled, spinning helplessly as atmosphere vented into the dark. The enemy pressed forward, relentless, their weapons cutting arcs of destruction, but the Resolute fought back. Her guns roared, unleashing everything they had. Railgun slugs punched through alien hulls, tearing ships apart piece by piece. Missile barrages filled the void with fire, forcing the enemy to break formation. The Resolute's shields flared bright under the storm of enemy fire, each hit shaking the ship to its core. Captain Kyle stood unflinching, shouting orders as sparks rained from the ceiling. "Bring us closer, target their engines. Do not let them past us." The crew obeyed with grim determination. They knew they were not fighting for survival, they were fighting for time. Every second the Resolute stood was another second for the civilians to escape. One by one the frigates fell. The enemy ships swarmed them, tearing through their defenses, ripping them apart. But each frigate died hard, ramming enemies, detonating their reactors, taking as many with them as possible. The void became a graveyard of burning wrecks, human and alien alike. Soon, only the Resolute remained. Her hull was scarred, her shields flickering, her weapons nearly dry. The enemy circled her, dozens of ships ready to finish the kill. But Kyle refused to yield. He stood at the center of his bridge, eyes locked on the stars. "They will not pass us," he whispered. The Resolute charged forward, engines screaming. She rammed headlong into the heart of the alien formation, guns blazing in every direction. Alien ships shattered under her assault, torn apart at point-blank range. The crew knew this was their last stand, but still they fought, every hand working with desperate fury. An alien plasma lance struck the destroyer's flank, tearing through armor, igniting fires across the decks. Another strike ripped open her engines, sending the ship spiraling. But still she fought. Still she held the line. The convoy, now light years away, sent their final transmission. "We are clear. Tell the Resolute, tell them we made it." The message never reached Captain Kale. The enemy unleashed their full power. Plasma storms ripped through the Resolute, tearing her apart piece by piece. Her weapons fell silent, her hull cracked, her bridge burning. Captain Kyle stood until the very end, his last sight the stars blazing with fire, and then the Resolute was gone. When the civilian convoy finally reached safety, the story of their defenders spread across every colony. They told of the frigates that fought until they were nothing but wreckage, of the Resolute that stood alone against impossible odds, of Captain Kale who refused to retreat even in the face of certain death. The story became legend in days. Humanity did not mourn their deaths as mere tragedy. They celebrated them as proof that humans would not kneel, proof that even outnumbered, even overwhelmed, they would fight with everything they had. The enemy had won the battle, yes. The convoy had barely escaped. The Resolute and her escorts were gone, but something far more dangerous had been born in the ashes of that clash. The galaxy began to whisper again, but this time the whispers carried not fear, but warning. The aliens had tested humanity twice now, and both times they had found something they had not expected. Humans did not retreat. Humans did not break. Humans fought until the void itself burned, and as the story of the Resolute spread across the stars, humanity's vast fleet continued to gather. 700,000 warships, fueled not just by anger, but by the memory of heroes who held the line. The first clash was over. The war was only beginning. The galaxy was no longer quiet. Across human space, the story of the Resolute spread like fire in dry grass. Entire colonies lit candles in the darkness, whispering the names of Captain Kale and his crew. They were gone, but their defiance had become something greater, a spark that refused to die. But grief quickly hardened into fury. Humanity had lost one colony. Then another convoy had nearly been wiped out. That was enough. The Terran Council, long accused of hesitation and delay, finally made a choice that would echo for centuries. They sent the call to arms. Every channel across the colonies carried the same message. Every screen, every comm station, every transmission carried the Council's words. Humanity is under attack. Our people are slaughtered. Our colonies burned. The enemy seeks to erase us. We will not allow it. Every ship, every soldier, every hand willing to fight. The time has come. Assemble. For Eidolon Prime, for the Resolute, for humanity. The words shook the stars. Shipyards that had been idle now blazed with activity. Factories shifted production from trade goods to weapons. Old warships, once mothballed, were dragged from storage, their hulls repaired, their cannons rearmed. Recruitment lines stretched. For kilometers as volunteers poured in, men and women who had never held a weapon but refused to stand by while their people were hunted. But the enemy was not idle either. Reports flooded in from scouts and spies. Alien fleets were moving across the border, spreading like shadows into unclaimed space. Outposts went dark without explanation. Merchant lanes became killing grounds. The enemy did not speak, did not bargain, did not pause. Their purpose was simple: eradication. And still humanity gathered. At the great shipyard of Mars, warships filled the void. Colossal battleships, each one the size of a city, rolled out of their cradles. Swarms of destroyers and frigates assembled in formation, their hulls gleaming under the red light of the sun. Carriers prepared their fighter wings, pilots climbing into cockpits with grim determination. On Earth itself, the skies trembled as fleets lifted into orbit. The people stood below, watching as their guardians rose into the stars, their cheers echoing through the cities. They knew many of those ships would not return, but still they cheered, because humanity was no longer afraid. The Council issued the numbers, and they stunned even the most seasoned commanders. In total, 700,000 warships would gather, a fleet so vast that when deployed, its formation would blot out starlight. But numbers were not enough. Humanity needed strategy. In the war chambers of Luna, admirals and generals argued over tactics. Some demanded immediate retaliation, a strike deep into enemy territory. Others warned caution, insisting they must first defend the colonies. Voices rose, fists slammed onto tables, tempers flared. But over them all, one voice carried calm authority. Admiral Varric, commander of the First Fleet, stood and spoke. He was a man with iron-grey hair and a gaze that seemed to cut through the noise. He had served in a dozen battles, though never one like this. His words silenced the chamber. "They believe we are weak," Varric said. "They believe we will run, as prey runs from the predator. They are wrong. We will not scatter our strength. We will not waste our fury on small strikes. We will show them the truth of humanity. We will bring the storm to them, not in whispers, not in shadows, in fire." The chamber fell silent, and then slowly the Council agreed. The decision was made. The fleets would unite into one unstoppable armada. They would not wait for the enemy to pick them apart. Humanity would gather all its strength and strike when the time was right, but time was not their ally. Across the border, the enemy was moving faster than expected. Scouts reported entire alien armadas gathering, their numbers unknown, their technology strange and terrible. In some sectors, they outnumbered the humans 3-1. They burned worlds not for conquest, but for silence, erasing everything, leaving only ash. Whispers of their cruelty spread. Refugees spoke of harvesters that turned, cities into husks, of weapons that tore flesh from bone, of soldiers who felt no fear, no hesitation, no mercy. They left behind nothing but ruin, and still humanity gathered. On colony worlds like Titan's Reach and Meridian, men and women left their homes behind to serve. Farmers became soldiers, engineers became gunners, scientists became strategists. For the first time in history, every human world, every outpost, every scattered colony stood united under one cause. The fleets trained endlessly. Massive war games filled the void, ships maneuvering in precise formations, simulating battle after battle. Admirals drilled their crews until exhaustion, knowing that hesitation in the real war meant death. Yet beneath the steel and fire, fear lingered. Commanders whispered among themselves, what if 700,000 was not enough? What if the enemy's true numbers dwarfed their own? What if humanity was gathering not for vengeance, but for extinction? But no one dared speak these. Doubts allowed. The people needed hope, and so the leaders gave it to them. They spoke of the Resolute, of Captain Cale, of every sacrifice made so far. They promised vengeance, promised justice, promised survival, and the people believed. The storm was gathering. In the far reaches of space, the enemy prepared as well. Their fleets moved with silent precision, their weapons burning brighter, their commanders patient. They had studied humanity now. They had tested them. And though the humans were more stubborn than expected, the enemy still believed the war would end the same way. Humanity crushed beneath their heel. But they did not understand what was coming. Because when humans gathered, they did not gather. In fear, they gathered in rage, in unity, in fire, and across the stars, 700,000 warships waited for the order. Their cannons silent, their engines ready, their crews whispering the same vow over and over again. Never again. Never. Another Eidolon Prime, never another Resolute, never another convoy left to burn. The storm was almost ready to break, and when it did, the galaxy itself would tremble. The order finally came. It was not spoken in whispers. It was not hidden in secret codes. The Terran Council broadcast it across. Every channel, every colony, every fleet. One simple command, 5 words that carried the weight of an entire species. The Armada will advance now. The galaxy shuddered as 700,000 human warships ignited their engines. Whole sectors dimmed as their drives burned bright, streaking fire across the void. Civilian colonies looked up into their skies and saw fleets passing overhead. Like storms of light, entire generations had never seen so many warships in one place. Now they watched their defenders rise into the stars, knowing history was unfolding before their eyes. The first destination was chosen carefully. It was not an alien stronghold, not a fortress world, not even a base of power. It was a staging, ground, one of the forward systems the enemy had seized after Eidolon Prime. Intelligence reports confirmed the aliens had gathered fleets there, fleets that believed they were untouchable. They were wrong. The Armada arrived in silence. No challenge, no warning, no negotiation, only the endless black, filled with the gleam of steel and the cold light of stars. Then, with a single word from Admiral Varric, the storm began. Fire! The void erupted. Tens of thousands of railguns thundered at once, their slugs streaking like meteors. Missile clouds rose and spread, weaving fire through the stars. Carriers unleashed endless waves of fighters, their engines burning as they swarmed forward. Human battleships opened their main cannons, tearing holes into space itself with the fury of their weapons. The enemy had expected a fight. They had not expected this. Their fleets scrambled into formation, weapons blazing. Plasma lances cut through the dark, tearing human destroyers apart in brilliant explosions. Enemy interceptors swarmed the fighters, colliding in chaotic dogfights that lit the void with fire. Their capital ships, massive and angular, fired beams that split entire formations, forcing the humans to adapt under pressure. But humanity did not falter. The first clash of the Grand Armada was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships, the size of cities, collided in close-range combat, cannons roaring until barrels melted. Frigates darted through gaps, striking at engines and reactors. Fighters died by the hundreds, burning like falling stars. The darkness became a sea of wreckage, metal and bodies drifting, flames still clinging to broken hulls. From his flagship, Admiral Varric stood unmoving. His eyes followed the chaos on the hollow display, his hands steady as he issued orders. He did not shout. He did not panic. His voice was iron, every command precise, every maneuver designed to break the enemy piece by piece. "They are strong," he said quietly to his officers, "but they are not stronger than our will. Drive them back. Show them what fire truly is." The humans pressed forward. One alien dreadnought unleashed a devastating plasma storm, annihilating an entire squadron of cruisers in a single strike. But before it could fire again, 3 human battleships converged on it, unleashing all their fury. The dreadnought cracked apart, its burning carcass tumbling into the void. Another alien carrier launched wave after wave of drones, mechanical swarms that overwhelmed human fighters. But the drones were not prepared for human ingenuity. A squadron of pilots, low on ammunition, deliberately lured the swarm into a minefield laid minutes earlier. The explosion was so massive that even Varric's bridge trembled under the shockwave. The battle dragged on for hours, each side refusing to yield, but slowly, relentlessly, the tide began to shift. Humanity's numbers, their coordination, their sheer fury began to overwhelm the enemy. Alien ships that had never known defeat found themselves surrounded, their hulls collapsing under fire. Commanders who believed humans would scatter now watched entire wings of warships fight in perfect unity, and for the first time since the war began, the enemy broke. It happened quietly at first. A single alien cruiser fled the line, engines burning hard as it retreated. Then another followed, and another. Soon, entire squadrons were pulling back, their formations collapsing, their weapons falling silent. The humans did not hesitate. They pursued, driving the enemy from the system, burning them out of every corner, chasing them into the dark. The stars blazed with fire, trails of wreckage marking the path of retreat. When the last alien ship vanished into the void, the armada fell silent. The battlefield was a graveyard. Wreckage drifted endlessly, fires still glowing, debris fields stretching for light years. Thousands of human ships were gone, their crews lost forever. But the enemy had lost far more. The system was theirs. Humanity had struck back. The comms exploded with cheers. Crews shouted, sang, wept with joy. Civilians across the colonies received the news within hours, and for the first time since Eidolon Prime, they felt hope stronger than fear. Humanity had not only survived the clash, humanity had won. Admiral Varric did not celebrate. He stood on the deck of his flagship, staring at the wreckage on the display. His face was stone, his voice calm. "This is only the beginning," he said softly. "The fire has only started to spread." And he was right, because though humanity had won the system, the enemy was already preparing for more. Their retreat was not chaos, it was calculation. They had tested humanity again, and this time they had learned something new. Humans were not prey. Humans were predators, and predators burned with fire that did not die easily. The galaxy would remember this day as the first great clash of the Armada, a battle where 700,000 warships unleashed their fury, where the stars themselves seemed to burn with humanity's rage. But it was not the end. It was only the opening strike in a war that would decide the fate of everything. And somewhere in the dark, beyond the wreckage, beyond the fire, the enemy gathered once more. This time, they would not underestimate humanity. This time, they would bring everything they had. The stars had burned once. Soon, they would burn again. The enemy had always believed themselves untouchable. For centuries, their fleets had crushed every rival, their weapons burning entire civilizations into ash. They were the predators of the galaxy, the rulers of the void. None had dared resist them. None had dared fight back. Until now. The news of the great battle spread faster than light. Humanity had not only survived the clash, they had driven the enemy out, shattered fleets that once seemed unstoppable, and taken back a system in fire and blood. The echoes of that victory shook the alien empire to its core. On their capital world, a planet of black stone and burning skies, the High Command assembled in silence. The chamber was vast, carved from obsidian, its walls lined with towering statues of past conquerors. But the silence in that room was unlike anything their empire had known before. For the first time in generations, they had tasted defeat. Holograms of burning ships filled the air, glowing red and orange. The reports were undeniable. Hundreds of their vessels destroyed, entire legions gone. The humans had fought like nothing the Empire had ever faced. They did not retreat when outnumbered. They did not surrender when surrounded. They fought with a fire that consumed everything in its path. The generals hissed in anger, their voices sharp as blades. Some demanded immediate retaliation, a strike against Earth itself. Others urged caution, whispering of numbers too vast to ignore. 700,000 human warships, united under one banner that was not a threat to dismiss. At the head of the chamber sat the Supreme Commander, cloaked in shadows. His voice was low, but it carried like thunder. "These humans are different," he said. "They do not bow, they do not break, they burn. And if we do not crush them now, their fire will spread until it consumes us all." The chamber trembled with his words. For the first time in their empire's long reign, they faced the possibility of a war they could not easily win. But fear was dangerous, and already whispers of doubt were spreading through the empire's ranks. Soldiers who once believed victory was certain now questioned their commanders. Captains who once laughed at the idea of resistance now spoke of human cunning, of battles where humans fought until their last breath. Even the common citizens of the empire began to tremble. They had been told the humans were weak, fragile, soft creatures who would shatter under pressure. But the stories told of a different truth. They told of Eidolon Prime's silence, of the Resolute's last stand, of the Great Armada's fire in the stars. They told of humanity rising together as one. The Empire had created a monster, and now that monster was coming for them. In human space, the Armada did not rest. Shipyards worked without pause, repairing losses, building replacements. Recruitment continued at a furious pace, swelling the ranks with fresh soldiers. Every colony, every outpost, every station prepared for the next stage of the war. Humanity had struck once, and now they prepared to strike again. Admiral Varric stood before his fleet, his voice carried to every ship. "They thought we were prey. They thought we would run. But we showed them the truth. We are hunters. We are fire. And we will not stop until their empire trembles and falls." The crews roared in reply. The Armada was no longer just a fleet. It was a promise that humanity would never kneel, never surrender, never allow another world to burn without consequence. And across the galaxy, the alien empire listened. Their spies reported every move, every gathering, every whisper of human defiance. And though the Supreme Commander swore vengeance, though their generals promised fire greater than before, something new crept into their voices. Uncertainty. They had believed this war would be simple. Now they faced an enemy that fought like no other. An enemy that turned loss into strength, grief into fury, despair into fire. The Empire trembled. In the shadows of their vast palaces, rulers debated what none dared speak aloud. Could the humans actually win? Could this young, reckless species rise high enough to challenge an empire older than their entire civilization? The galaxy itself held its breath. For the first time in living memory, the predators of the stars were afraid. And humanity had only just begun. The fire was spreading, and soon it would reach the heart of the empire itself. The galaxy held its breath. For weeks, the alien empire had prepared. Their fleets gathered at the edge of their core worlds. Fortresses armed with weapons powerful enough to split moons stood ready, and legions of soldiers waited for the command to strike. They believed humanity would hesitate. They believed humanity would bleed itself dry in small battles. They were wrong. The Terran Armada did not wait. It advanced with fire in its engines, 700,000 warships cutting through the void like a tidal wave. It was not stealth, it was not caution, it was vengeance carried on steel. Entire sectors watched as the Armada passed overhead, blotting out the stars with its sheer size. And at its head stood Admiral Varric, his voice steady, his gaze locked on the enemy's heart. "This is not for conquest," he said to his crew. "This is not for glory. This is for Eidolon Prime. This is for the Resolute. This is for every world they thought they could erase. Today we show them what humanity truly is." The order was given. The Armada surged forward. The alien empire met them with everything they had. Fleets numbering in the millions rose from their strongholds. Their war engines blazed with plasma fire. Their dreadnoughts loomed like mountains of steel. The two forces collided in the void, and the stars themselves seemed to shatter. The first wave was chaos. Plasma storms tore through human lines, annihilating dozens of ships in an instant. Alien carriers unleashed endless swarms of drones, drowning human fighters in oceans of steel. Missiles and railguns screamed through the dark, detonating with enough force to light up entire planets. But humanity did not break. Formations shifted, adapting faster than the enemy expected. Destroyers dove into the swarms, sacrificing themselves to clear paths for carriers. Frigates darted through gaps, crippling enemy engines with precise strikes. Battleships unleashed their fury in coordinated salvos, tearing dreadnoughts apart, piece by piece. The void became a furnace. Wreckage burned in every direction, bodies and machines drifting together in silence. Entire squadrons vanished in fire. And yet still, humanity pressed forward. On the flagship, Admiral Varric's eyes never left the display. Every loss carved a line in his heart, but his voice never shook. "Advance!" he ordered again and again. "Advance! Break them! Burn! Them do not stop!" And the Armada obeyed. Hours passed, then days. The battle stretched on, vast and terrible, a storm that consumed entire systems. Neither side yielded, neither side fled. But slowly, relentlessly, humanity's fury began to tip the scales. For every ship the enemy destroyed, humanity answered with two more. For every world burned, humanity struck back with fire greater still, and the aliens began to realize the truth. The humans were not fighting for territory. They were not fighting for dominance. They were fighting for survival. And nothing in the galaxy is more dangerous than a species that refuses to die. The enemy's great dreadnoughts fell, one by one. Carriers were gutted, fortresses reduced to rubble. Human fleets carved paths deeper into enemy space, cutting out the Empire's heart. At last, the Armada reached the enemy's capital system. The alien world loomed below, black stone and burning skies, its cities armed with colossal cannons. For centuries, it had stood as a symbol of fear and power. Now it trembled under the shadow of 700,000 human warships. Admiral Varric stood tall on his bridge. His voice carried to every ship, every soldier, every fighter pilot. This is where it ends. For every colony burned, for every child stolen, For every world left in silence, today humanity takes back the stars. The Armada opened fire. It was not a battle, it was annihilation. Railguns thundered in endless salvos, missiles blotted out the skies, fighters swarmed through the atmosphere, tearing through defenses, striking at command centers. The alien capital's cannons fired desperately, but they could not stem the tide. One by one, their defenses shattered. One by one, their great cities fell silent. The empire that had ruled for centuries, that had crushed dozens of civilizations, that had believed itself untouchable, was broken in a single storm of human vengeance. The Supreme Commander made his last broadcast, his voice filled with fury and disbelief. "You are not supposed to exist," he hissed. But his words were drowned by fire as his palace collapsed in a blaze of steel and flame. And then, silence. The war was over. The Terran Armada did not cheer. They did not sing. They stood in the wreckage of victory, knowing the cost had been unbearable. Tens of thousands of ships were gone, millions of lives lost. The void was filled with graves, but humanity had endured. Humanity had risen. Humanity had shown the galaxy what it meant to strike back. From that day forward, no one called them weak. No one called them prey. The stars themselves remembered the retribution of humanity, the day when 700,000 warships burned. An empire into ash, not for conquest, but for justice. And in the silence that followed, one truth echoed louder than all others: humanity would never be forgotten again.